Welcome, welcome everyone. Please take your seats because you know it's our tradition now to start this event almost on time. Just within about 5 minutes, right? Welcome to the third in the presidential lecture series featuring Dr. Michael Perez. And I want to welcome everyone here. I see a lot of students in Kirk Johnson sociology classes, so welcome a lot of faculty. And of course, before we get started with this event, we'll recognize the dignitaries in the House, beginning with our Board of Regents and UOG protocol. I'd like to welcome to you Andrew LeBlanc, our board member. And of course, what would the presidential lecture series be without the president? And so I welcome Dr. Robert Underwood, the 10th president of the University of Guam. We also have Dr. Helen Whippy, our senior vice president of academic and student affairs. And David O'Brien, and he is our vice president of administration and finance. And I'd also like to recognize our senator, the Honorable Benjamin Cruz. He is the vice speaker of the 30th Guam legislature. I'd also like to welcome tonight Dr. Narissa Britannia Schaefer, and she is the superintendent of the Guam public school system. And I also see Dean Mary Spencer of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. Welcome all of you, and now I'd like to call to the podium Dr. Robert Underwood to introduce our guest speaker for tonight's series.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'd also like to recognize former Senator Dr. Catherine Huggins. You know, I know today is Cinco de Mayo, and today sometimes people confuse that with Mexican Independence Day, but that's not what it really is. Today it's a recognition of the victory of the Mexicans over the French. But I don't prefer to think of it that way. I think of it as the triumph of indigenous good leadership and resistance to imperialism. Because, you know, Benito Juarez was the first truly indigenous president of Mexico, and he led the Mexicans against the invading French. I know a lot of us like to think of it as kind of Latino St. Patrick's Day or something, just a chance to get drunk, but it's a little bit more than that. In partial recognition of that triumph, and but mostly in celebration of the triumph of the human spirit, in this case, the Chamorro human spirit, I'm honored to introduce to you this evening the third speaker in the presidential lecture series here at the University of Guam. Tonight's speaker is a relatively young man, but one with a distinguished career as a scholar on many issues of importance to Guam, the Marianas Islands, and especially the Chamorro people. He is a sociologist. You know, sociologists many times are kind of in their own world, and those of you who've had a sociology professor or two know that. Many of you have heard the question, how many sociologists does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is none. For the sociologist is likely to say, the light bulb is fine. There's something wrong with the system. Focusing in on the context, the social environment, the dynamics of trends larger than the individual unit, and thereby giving us a new set of eyes to witness the human panoramas, sociologists see things that we don't see, or at least they tell us so. Sociologists hear things we don't hear because they listen to different voices. And sociologists use different words from us because they have invented their own language. And tonight we have a master sociologist and a scholar. He writes articles with titles that I have a hard time pronouncing, let alone comprehending. Inter-ethnic antagonism in the wake of colonialism. U.S. territorial, racial, ethnic relations at the margins. Or Pacific identities beyond U.S. racial formulations, the case of Chamorro ambivalence and flux. Both these titles suggest tantalizing concepts and breakthrough formulations. The underlying framework for much of Dr. Perez's work is diaspora, the notion that Chamorros are involved in some kind of mass migration, and sometimes on occasion return. The underpinnings of this diaspora are multifaceted and all appear to be a matter of individual choice. But sociologists are supposed to discern trends and not just aggregate a series of individual choices. And Dr. Perez provides this analysis in this spirit, and he does so in a compelling way. But the notion of diaspora is more than just a phenomena for Chamorros to ponder, even if it is the focus this evening. Dr. Perez reminded me yesterday that a majority of the students at the university are involved in their own diaspora theme. They're all members of some other diaspora, mostly non-Chamorro, and explaining to themselves their presence and their movement in the context of Guam society. For sure, the faculty comes as part of some larger diaspora, and perhaps someone here on campus will take up the challenge to examine this phenomenon. In the meantime, we will listen intent and ponder the case of the Chamorro people of Guam and the Marianas. Dr. Perez is a full professor of sociology at Cal State University, Fullerton, a school that I attended for one semester when Dr. Perez was just being born. He may be moving to the University of California, Riverside soon, an institution where he earned his PhD. It's a pleasure and an honor that I introduce to you this evening a Perez, a Corinto, a sociology, and a member of the diasporic stream, Dr. Michael Perez.
Wow, that was quite an introduction. Can you stay up here and continue? Well, being Cinco de Mayo, I had to ponder an introduction that was historically significant, and Dr. Underwood took most of my material. But I did say one thing, and there's another Indio Mestizo Mexican that comes to mind that has historical significance by the name of Jose Cuervo. And because he's the president, he allowed me to put something other than water in the bottle here so I can relax my nerves. Just kidding. No, as I was driving around today, I was driving around the island a little bit, and I was listening to one of the local radio stations, and one of the themes that came on to commemorate and to mark this date, Cinco de Mayo, the theme song that was played was Lowrider, the famous song Lowrider, and it got me to ponder, how might that be relevant to what I have to talk about tonight. And one of the misconceptions within a society in which people converge in a geographical space as a result of multiple histories and experiences is a distortion of who people are. And so I found it both ironic and humorous that Lowrider is not only a theme that is often used as a background beat to represent Mexican culture, but that it's also transplanted on Guam. So the issue of diaspora is not simply the migration of peoples. We're talking about multiple routes of not only geographical space and physical movement of bodies, but the symbolic movement of spirits and the cultural movements of ideas and cultures. And so really what we're talking about, as Dr. Underwood said, the underpinning rooted in diaspora is really the story of people and movement in the world, in precise response to being displaced. Yeah. And so the story of Chamorros is a case in point, but it also is a unique case in point in the ways in which Chamorros have responded and resisted and adapted to